President Snyder receives.
The goals for executives in traditional education are fairly consistent between public and private institutions. Traditional university presidents and executives look to properly run the institution, improve and develop academic programs, improve the student body quality, many times improving diversity, raising the endowment, and improving the school ranking and prestige. Gordon Gee, upon taking office, established 6 strategic goals for making the coming years Ohio State's time. 1. Forge one Ohio State University. Put students first. Focus on faculty success. Recast our research agenda. Commit to our communities, and simplify university systems and structures. Executives at for-profit institutions have very different goals. The Apollo Group, in their annual report, lay out key themes of their strategic plan. 1 is to maximize the value of our University of Phoenix business, and 2, intelligently expand access into new markets. The question to ask is if this value is simply profit for the University of Phoenix, or if they aim to increase the quality of their product, which is education. While the executive goals at for-profit institutions solely profit maximizers, and traditional colleges and universities, as their mission statement, so too do the incentives that drive the decisions of chief executives at these institutions. The University of Phoenix provides access to higher education opportunities. For-profit institutions are driven. It's the very first thing in their mission statement, and shows that they executive level incentive plans, increase their enrollment and access to individuals, business models that require continuous growth, more so than they aim to improve the quality of their education. New student enrollment. Traditional institutions executives, however, receive bonuses dependent on annual performance and frequently will cater for alumni support in order to have the backing of alumni. Furthermore, the profits from traditional higher education institutions are turned back and invested in the entity, while profits from for-profit education institutions go to increasing compensation for executives or to reward shareholders, therefore incentivizing the for-profit institution to maximize its profits, increase its revenues, and cut its cost as well as possible in the current term. Future incentives differ even greatly between the different institutions. For-profit institution executives are compensated mainly via equity, whereas traditional institutions compensate their executives with guaranteed deferred payments, retirement packages, as well as the prestige of raising the profile of a traditional institution, as well as being a successful president. There is almost a perverse incentive for for-profit institutions to take on students of lower quality, as it will guarantee more revenue from tuition, as these students are unlikely to graduate in as quick a time as a higher quality student, and the benefits of a student graduating are very minimal for for-profit institutions. While traditional institutions encourage their students to be as successful as possible in order to hopefully be rewarded with some type of endowment, gift, or donation, for-profit institutions do not take these gifts at all. Therefore, there is very little benefit for for-profit institutions to cater to its graduates or to encourage its students to graduate. For-profit institutions pride themselves on the no-frills approach to education and offer Spartan amenities outside of instruction. Yet, surprisingly, these institutions cost much more than they lead on. For-profit schools pride themselves on providing access to higher education for individuals who otherwise would not be granted such access, those who do not have the financial means to attend traditional schools. Yet, a for-profit university education is even more expensive on average. After calculating in grant aid, for-profit schools are more than twice as expensive as public institutions, and about 50% more expensive than private institutions. In spite of the high cost of tuition at for-profit institutions of higher education, the industry continues to grow. For-profit institutions grew at 4 to 5 times the rate of enrollment at traditional institutions. 20 years ago, they held only 2% of student enrollment and currently hold about 13% of student enrollment. The Apollo Group, leader in the industry, is extremely dependent on this tuition revenue. Nearly 60% of their revenue comes from federal student loans, while the remaining comes from state-funded financial aid, tuition assistance for military personnel and employers, and finally, personal funds. As you can see on this graph, there is a tremendous dependency on new student enrollment at the Apollo Group. In green, the new student enrollment as a percentage, and in blue, the stock price. As the new student enrollment dropped significantly after the recession, the stock price went much lower as well. This dependence on new students is exemplified in the revenue pie charts on this graph. As you can see, for 4-year programs used here, because not only are 4-year programs encompassing the majority of students, but even more so, the significant majority of revenue sources and expenses, for-profit institutions rely extremely heavily on tuition and fees, as well as government grants and contracts, whereas private and public traditional institutions derive much more funding from state appropriations for state institutions, and returns on the endowment for private institutions. Furthermore, ancillary services such as hospitals and athletics for private and public traditional institutions also allow for more revenue sources. When calculating the revenue per student, the numbers are even more astounding. At public institutions, the revenue per student comes to about $19,827, significantly augmented by the amount of state appropriations. At private institutions, the revenue per student comes to nearly $44,000. And at for-profit institutions, the revenue per student is only $10,900. Also, in looking at the expenses, you can see how the for-profit industry is significantly different than the traditional models of education. The no-frills, instruction-based approach by for-profit institutions is largely due to the fact that an enormous amount of their expenditure is on administrative support, student support, and the like. They do not provide any more information than a broad category of what that expenditure is used for, likely to hide the fact that the majority of it is used for administrative expenses rather than for instruction. As you can see, the amount spent on instruction is much more similar at private and public traditional universities. When calculating the expense per student among 4-year programs, public universities will spend roughly $28,000 per student. Private universities will spend roughly $38,000 per student, while for-profit universities will only spend $9,600 per student. The lack of funding spent on instruction is even more evident in the graduation rates between traditional institutions and for-profit institutions. The graduation rate for 4-year programs shows that for-profit institutions are significantly lower than public and private institutions. When adjusting this to only include first-time, full-time students in 4-year programs, for-profit institutions only graduate a fifth of these students in 4 years. Of these first-time, full-time students, 82% receive some form of financial aid and 53% borrow through the federal student loan program. So what are the consequences of the current dichotomy between traditional universities and colleges and for-profit institutions? Well, currently there is a $1 trillion student loan debt outstanding in the United States, and it's growing. The Occupy Wall Street movement used this forgiveness of student debt as a major rallying cry in their protests. The head of the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau has recently deemed this debt too big to fail. Furthermore, this student debt cannot be forgiven. The Consumer Finance Protection Bureau estimated that just in the last year alone, $117 billion in student loans were taken out. For-profit institutions represent only about 10% of students. However, they receive 25% of all federal loans and account for 50% of the defaults on these loans. That student debt comes to about $3,000 per American. And the number of defaults is only going to increase as the cost of education continues to increase. Some individuals have called for the forgiveness of student loans, but this would only aid the for-profit institutions, as they would continue to take advantage of students, and federal loan money would continue to line the pockets of for-profit executives, rather than assisting individuals in obtaining a higher education.